Hey everyone, James from TeaDB here, going to be talking about Xiaguan today. So, it's a non-drinking episode today. Going to just be sort of giving sort of an intro to the brand, just talking a little bit about it in general, sort of its reputation, a couple different teas to try, especially if you're not familiar with it. So, I guess this may end up being a little bit more of a novice-oriented episode. But I think there should be enough here for more experienced tea drinkers to listen to and to maybe agree or disagree with, especially some of my specific Chagwon recommendations. I'm going to try to recommend some teas that are great to sort of start with, or good representation of the actual brand. So juggling a couple Chagwon tools right in front of me right here. This is the gold ribbon, and this is a very common Jiaji. Couple of tools, you've probably seen them behind me in other videos. So Xiaguan, one of the two biggest factories. It features a crane on the middle, so you can see right here there's a crane. Is there a crane on this one? I'm not sure, but it's often called the Jiaji Tuo Cha company. So they're really known for this particular shape. They also are really well known for iron cakes. So those are definitely going to be a couple of the recommendations of teas to try if you're trying to just sort of get the gist of the brand. And one thing, so one of the on the Discord, one of the sort of like subcategories or jokes, inside jokes about them is that there's the crane gang, the people that really like Chagwon. I don't know if I quite qualify as a full-fledged member of the crane gang. There's definitely some Chagwon teas that I do enjoy, but I'm not sure that I like them to the extent of some of the people. So Chagwon has sort of a reputation of making very strong, perhaps harsh, and smoky teas. And, that was my experience a lot in my first couple of years of drinking as well. And I've realized over the years that there's a couple Chagwon teas that I've ended up buying in a fair amount of quantity. You can tell, just maybe from even behind me, that there's a fair amount of Tuo Chas and stuff like that behind me as well. And I've realized that all those teas that I ended up buying, they're not really smoky at all. Some people might say that they're rough and harsh and need a few more years of aging. And I don't necessarily dispute that's the case. These teas are ones that I certainly wouldn't recommend buying young. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But I don't think that any of them are particularly smoky, at least to my taste. So the age will help to really get rid of those sort of harsher, more convert those really smoky notes into something that I think is quite a bit more interesting. So I think Chagwon really does sort of age out of that smoke profile. So if you're smoke adverse, or if you are seeking out smoke, those are a couple things to keep in mind when you think about how Chagwon ages. So if you're smoke averse, maybe you want to check out Chagwon when it's older. And if you are someone that really wants that smoky taste, check out some Chagwon that's kunming stored. That's not my personal taste. I think these teas could really use a lot of aging and time, as well as humid storage. Another thing, if you were to just throw sort of darts at different Chagwon productions from different years, I think, especially when the tea is younger, you're going to get a lot of misses. For me, I know that would certainly be the case. So if I throw a dart at a random 2010 Chagwon board that contains all the different Chagwon teas on there, and I just hit a random tea, I think odds are pretty good that I'm not going to enjoy that tea at that point in time. And I think those odds get considerably better as you get older. So a lot of the Chagwon teas I've ended up buying are sort of in that mid-2000s range. I think the Chagwon teas that are from 2003 or earlier are even significantly better than that, but the cost does go up a lot. So there's a couple big turning points where the cost becomes, just another level higher than it would be for other ones. So you see something very similar with Dai to an even greater extent than Chagwon, but just something to keep in mind. A tea from 2003, for instance, a Jiaji from 2003 versus 2004, the cost just about doubles. 2005, on the other hand, is just very slightly cheaper than 2004. Which, and if you taste them, there's a pretty big difference between 2003 and 2004. So there's a reason that the price differs there. something with the recipe changing, as well as quantity just going up and up over the years. So a more scarce product, as a result, is usually going to have a little bit of a higher price. And there's other teas that are just, frankly, in my opinion, not great examples of Xiaguan that end up getting covered. And part of that is my fault. In the case of something like the Love Forever, it's a tea that we've featured here a couple times on the show, and I have quite a few cakes of. It's a tea I'm quite fond of. I think it's a pretty bad, frankly, example of Chagwon. I don't think it's very typical of the brand at all. So it's not one that, if you're looking to sort of understand Chagwon, that I think the Love Forever is a good example. I think it's a good tea, and I think it's worth certainly trying if you're interested in it. But is it a good example of Chagwon? In my opinion, no. Another one that I think is good to try, but also maybe not a great example of Chagwon, something like the Baoyan or Tibetan Flame. So you'll see sort of mushrooms or bricks, I think, for this. And that uses very, very cheap tea, and it requires a lot of aging, more so than I think even your typical Jiaji Tuo Cha would to become drinkable. So I think, is that tea worth trying? Yes. Should you take that as a good benchmark for Chagwon? No, not in my opinion. Okay, so two big criterias when looking for Chagwon. So I think these are the two most important sort of big concepts, if your tastes are similar to mine, is that you want to look at storage very, very closely. I think Chagwon is a tea that really can use very, very humid storage. So there's a reason why this sort of tea is very, very popular in Southeast Asia, where the climate is even more hot and humid than something like southern China. So definitely recommend paying close attention to storage. Something that's been stored in Kunming for 15 years is just frankly not going to be very aged, and for me, something that I would personally avoid. In fact, I'm pretty much generally avoiding most Xiaguan tea that's stored in Kunming. So looking for a place like Guangzhou, Taiwan, or Malaysia. And I think that will improve your chances of success and having sort of that moment where the light bulb goes off and you sort of really understand the appeal of the brand. Taiwan, another great place. Did I mention that? I think I mentioned that. Okay. And the other thing is age group. For me, I'm looking for Chagwon that's usually at least 15 years old. So 15, 16, 17 years old. Those are ages that I would sample from. So 2006, maybe 2007 and older. I think in general, well, you can find some decent teas that are younger than that and might be borderline drinkable. I think this is really a factory that benefits a lot from that extra time. And I don't think the teas that are 15 or 16 years old are at the level where they're really going to hurt your wallet too much. So I would really recommend people seek out teas that are at least that age and not younger. For something like Dai, I could recommend people check out teas that are a few years younger. I think you have a higher rate of success there. Something like 11 or 12 years old, you might find something that's borderline drinkable there. For Chagwon, I think you want to, in my personal opinion, I think you should look older. Okay, already talked a little bit about turning points in Pu'er, in Chagwon, sort of in that 2003-2004 range. Price will generally go up as you get older, or go down as you get younger and younger. Very easy to find a lot of $20 or $30 Chagwon cakes that are 10 or 11 years old. On average, I'd say Chagwon is quite a bit cheaper than Dai. It doesn't quite have that same status, which includes for the older, more special cakes, so pre-2004, but also seems to be the case for more recent ones. It's much, much rarer to find a Chagwon recipe that's extremely expensive from a more recent year. Not impossible, but it's less likely than Dai. Okay, so what are some actual good examples of tea to try, and where can you get them? So I think my first recommendation, and maybe someone would dispute this, is looking for something like a Jiaji Tuo or a Teji Tuo, which usually comes in sort of a bag. I think I have one right here. So a bag like this of Tuo Cha. And these are usually tippier in general, so smaller leaves, and they're going to give you a nice sharp caffeine boost. So recommend looking for those that are at least in that 2005-2006 range. You can search for even older. The 2003, I believe, is right now around 180 RMB, so that's somewhere between $20 and $25. When you go to a 2004, I think it's about $12 or $13. This one's 2005, so I think that was about $10 when I bought it. So still quite reasonable considering that's about 10 cents a gram for something from 2005. And I got mine from good old MXT, a Taobao vendor I've talked quite a bit about. You can look at the bottom and you can see sort of the date it was produced, so 2005 in August, so 16 years ago. So just a generally good daily tea is what you're looking for here. This is probably not a tea that's really going to blow anyone out of their socks or anything like that. It's just a fairly typical, I think, of Xiaguan daily tea. So seeking out some sort of a tool. I would generally recommend, again, something like this, even though I'm quite fond of these little gold ribbon tools, just because I think it's a little less typical. I think it's probably a better tea than the Jiaji, but I think the Jiaji is probably a better example of the brand. So if you're wondering my logic for picking one tool over the other. Another one to seek out is the Iron Cake 8653. And this one can get pretty confusing. I do plan on bringing on a Iron Cake. Well, actually, we brought this onto a normal episode, and I will actually be bringing a series of Chagwon teas onto some of these in-betweenisodes. So if you are a fan of the crane, your time is coming over the summer. And Iron Cake 8653. So this is basically kind of like the equivalent of their 7542 at Chagwon. Uses sort of mid-leaf grade leaves, I believe. They're really known for their iron cake, so it's very flat compression, no bing hole or anything like that. Their leaves tend to be very chopped. And the 2005 thick paper, I think, is pretty good. The quality really can differ a lot as you get later in the year, so which makes it very, very challenging to get good reference points. But I would personally recommend something like the January, February, or March 8653 that uses a thick paper. King Tmall has sold them at various points. They're usually at $80, $90. I believe MXT currently sells the March version, which I haven't tried recently, but I think is a pretty good bet to be similar to the January version. And I think these teas are borderline drinkable now and will continue to improve, and are a good example of sort of a classic Chagwon. And they have a very, very distinctive profile that is different than something like this Tuo Cha. So those are probably the two main teas I would earmark for people to just sort of try. And so really, if you're trying to get a good reference point for the brand, don't go for something like the 2011 Fei Tai that I've talked about in the past. Try to get something real, try to sample something that's at least has a pretty good reputation, because 8653 quality just varies a lot. So one may not be great compared to another one. So yeah, really seek out something that has a good reputation and don't cheap out to the cheapest thing. Because even something like the highest, like the 2005 January, which is one of the more expensive ones, can still be got for around $100 or less. All right, and as far as secondary teas, something like Gold Ribbon could be sort of like a second tier, like sort of second or third on your list on stuff to try. I like this one. This tool, if you see it, mine is from 2005. The Yin Kong comes in a set of 4. What else? Kongar is another classic. Nanjiao is also pretty decent. As far as the other recipes go, probably the second one you'll run into, something like an 8673. I kind of find 8673 personally to be a bit boring, but it's solid and it kind of has a pretty typical Chagwon taste, so that's not a bad one to try either. Where to buy? You can find these teas from a lot of vendors. I know Yunnan Sourcing in the past has sold Xiaguan not stored in Kunming, stored in Guangzhou or something like that. You can also find this from MXT, which I've shouted out, and you're comfortable going to Taobao. Can also find it from King Tmall. So Chagwon, not a difficult vendor to find if you just are willing to seek out. So those are 3 places that I think you can get those from. I believe Teasween Like also might be working on a 8653 tasting of some sort. So no idea on the timing of that, but that might also be something worth seeking out, just because 8653s can be such a clusterfuck, and having someone sort it out for you is nice. So yeah, let me know how you like this episode, if you found it useful, interesting, boring. If you are not a fan of Chagwon and like the big benefits, let me know. Let me know what your favorite Chagwon is, and if you find it to be very typical of the brand or not. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time.